"It hurts. This is my first time," the rancher froze and said, "It'll be over quick." The air smelled fresh, with a hint of earth and animals, and the sounds of the ranch slowly began to fill the morning. Chickens clucked near the barn, cows lowed softly in the distance, and a gentle wind rustled through the old wooden fences. Everything about the place felt alive and real, but for the young visitor standing at the edge of the field, it also felt a little overwhelming. He had never been to a place like this before. The quietness of the wide-open space made him notice every sound, every movement, and every little detail. His heart beat faster as he looked at the large barn, the sturdy fences, and the animals moving about. He had always lived in the city, surrounded by buildings and traffic, where mornings started with car horns and people rushing to work. But here, the rhythm of life was different. Time moved slower, and yet every moment seemed more intense. The world felt bigger, wilder, and more real. The rancher approached, his steps steady and confident, crunching softly on the dirt path. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, hands rough from years of work, and eyes that had seen everything a ranch could throw at him. He had a calm, quiet energy, like someone who had learned to move with life rather than against it. He smiled at the young visitor, noticing the way his eyes darted from the animals to the tools and back again. "Morning," the rancher said. His voice was low but kind. "Ready to get started today?" The young visitor nodded, but he could feel his stomach twist nervously. He was excited, yes, but he was also scared. Today, he was going to do something he had never done before, something that could hurt, something that would test his courage. The rancher seemed to sense his unease. He placed a firm hand on the visitor's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it'll be over quick. Just follow my lead." Those words were meant to be reassuring, but they also made the visitor's nerves jump a little more. Over quick, he thought. It still might hurt. But he knew he couldn't turn back now. Curiosity and determination pushed him forward. The rancher led him to a small corral where a cow waited patiently, its dark eyes watching them closely. The animal seemed calm but strong, and it moved with a quiet power that made the visitor step back instinctively. He had seen cows before, in pictures and in the city zoo, but seeing one up close was different. Its size, its strength, the way it breathed and shifted its weight, it was like standing next to a moving mountain. "Today," the rancher said, "you'll help me with something important. It's part of life on the ranch, and it's something every rancher has to learn. I'll guide you, but you need to stay calm and focus. The animal can feel your fear, and if you hesitate, it can make things harder." The visitor swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the responsibility. He had always thought of himself as brave, but bravery felt different when it was real. Not in stories, not in games, but in front of a living creature that could sense every heartbeat, every twitch, every small movement. He nodded, trying to steady his shaking hands. The rancher showed him the tools they would use, explaining each one carefully. The visitor listened closely, trying to memorize every step. The words were simple, but the meaning was heavy. He had to understand exactly what to do, not just for himself, but for the animal too. One wrong move, and it could hurt. The rancher's calm voice guided him like a gentle river, helping him focus on the task ahead instead of the fear in his chest. As they walked closer to the cow, the visitor noticed small details he had never seen before. The animal's breath came in slow, steady puffs, and the sound of it made his heart race. The cow's eyes followed every movement, calm but alert. Its ears twitched slightly, picking up every small sound. The visitor realized he was holding his own breath, trying not to startle it. Every sense felt alive. He could feel the rough texture of the cow's coat under his fingertips, smell the fresh hay mixed with the scent of the animal, hear the soft rustle of the grass under its hooves. The rancher knelt beside the cow, moving with practiced ease. His hands were gentle but firm as he checked the animal's legs, guiding it into position. The visitor watched every motion, noticing the rhythm, the patience, and the careful attention the rancher gave. "It's not about rushing," the rancher explained. "It's about respect for the animal and for the work. Do it right and it goes smooth. Panic and it can go badly." The visitor felt the truth of that statement settle in his chest. Respect. That was the key. He realized that this moment was not just about doing something new, it was about learning to move carefully, thoughtfully, and with courage. When the rancher looked up at him, he nodded encouragingly. "Your turn," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. It was now the visitor's moment to face his fear, to step forward and take responsibility. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out, feeling the cow's strength beneath his fingers. The animal shifted slightly, and his heart skipped a beat. He remembered the rancher's words, "It'll be over quick." He repeated them in his mind like a mantra: quick, calm, respect. That was all he needed to focus on. He bent slightly, following the steps the rancher had shown him, trying to keep his movements steady. Every second felt stretched, every detail amplified. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light on the corral, and for a moment the visitor felt like the whole world had narrowed down to this single moment, this single task. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears, feel the sweat on his palms, and yet he also felt something else, a strange excitement mixed with fear. This was the first time he was really doing something meaningful on the ranch. It was real. It was raw. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. The rancher stood close, his presence steadying the visitor. "Good," he said quietly. "You're doing fine, just a little more and it's done." The words were simple, but they carried reassurance. The visitor focused, breathing in slowly and letting the fear mix with determination. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of grass and hay. The cow stood patiently, its eyes calm and observant. The visitor felt a connection, not just to the animal, but to the ranch, to the work, to the life he was stepping into. He realized that this first experience, though scary, was also a kind of initiation. It was the beginning of understanding a world much bigger than himself, a world of patience, strength, and quiet courage. By the time the first step was completed, the visitor felt a mixture of relief and pride. His hands were sore, his muscles tense, but he had done it. The rancher smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder again. "See, quick, just like I said," he said, but the visitor knew it wasn't really about quickness. It was about facing fear, moving carefully, and learning to respect life in all its forms. The morning continued, and the visitor moved with more confidence. He noticed small things he hadn't before: the way the animals interacted, the rhythm of the ranch work, the quiet strength in the rancher's movements. Each moment felt alive, each second filled with meaning. By the time the sun was fully up, the visitor felt a new sense of belonging, a small but significant transformation. He had faced his first real challenge, and while it had hurt, it had also taught him something valuable. Courage comes from facing fear, not avoiding it. The day was just beginning, but the visitor already knew that this morning would stay with him forever. Every sound, every movement, every breath of the ranch seemed more vivid now. He felt a connection to the land, to the animals, and to the quiet, steady hands of the rancher who had guided him through it all. And deep down, he knew that this was only the first of many lessons, each one teaching him how to grow, how to face challenges, and how to respect life in its simplest, most powerful form. By the time they moved on to the next task, the visitor walked with a little more confidence, a little more understanding. The fear hadn't disappeared, it never would, but it had become something manageable, something that could be faced. And in that moment, he realized that first times were always the hardest, but they were also the most memorable. The ranch, the animals, the early morning light, they had all become part of his story now, a story he would carry with him, a story of courage, learning, and quiet triumph. The morning had fully awakened now, and the sun shone brightly over the wide-open ranch. Birds flitted across the sky, their songs mingling with the low calls of the cows and the gentle rustle of the wind through the tall grass. The young visitor felt a mixture of awe and nervous energy as he followed the rancher through the corral. The tasks of the morning were only beginning, and the weight of what was coming next pressed on him like the hot sun above. The rancher moved with a calm, steady rhythm, his hands and feet guided by years of experience. Every motion seemed purposeful, almost instinctive. The visitor watched closely, trying to absorb everything. He noticed how the rancher's eyes never left the animals, how his hands moved with confidence, and how even the smallest gesture seemed to carry a lesson. It was a world of precision, of patience, of quiet understanding. And now the visitor had to step into that world himself. "All right," the rancher said, his voice low but firm. "Now comes the part you've been waiting for. It's time for you to do more than just watch. You'll be helping with something important. You have to stay focused. Remember, the animal can sense your fear, and it responds to it." The visitor felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, his nerves were almost too strong to manage. His hands trembled slightly, and his heart raced as he looked at the cow standing before him. Its dark, calm eyes seemed to examine him, as if the animal already knew what he was thinking. The visitor tried to steady his breathing, repeating the rancher's words in his mind: focus, calm, respect. The rancher handed him the tools, explaining each one again in detail. "You don't need to rush," he said. "Take your time, but move confidently. Hesitation makes it harder. Remember, every step has a purpose. Focus on what I've shown you." The visitor nodded, his fingers gripping the tools tightly. He had never handled anything like this before. Even though he had read about it, even though he had imagined it 1,000 times in his head, nothing could prepare him for the reality of holding the tools in his hands and standing so close to a large, powerful animal. Every muscle in his body tensed. He wanted to step back to escape, but he knew he couldn't. He had come this far, he had to face it. The rancher stepped closer to the cow, positioning it carefully. "Watch how I do it first," he said. The visitor leaned in, his eyes following every movement. The rancher's hands were steady, almost graceful, as he guided the cow, explained the process, and demonstrated each step. The visitor tried to memorize every detail. The way the rancher held the animal's head, the gentle pressure of his hands, the small corrections he made to the cow's posture. It all seemed so natural, yet the visitor knew it required more than natural talent. It required patience, focus, and courage. When the rancher looked at him and nodded, the visitor knew it was time. "Your turn," the rancher said simply. The words sent a shiver down his spine. His hands felt heavy, almost unresponsive. The tools seemed strange in his grip, and the cow looked at him with calm, unblinking eyes. The visitor reminded himself to breathe, to focus, to respect the animal. Slowly, he stepped forward, his movements careful and deliberate. Every step felt like a test, every small action carrying a weight he had never experienced before. He placed his hands as the rancher had shown, trying to copy the careful precision he had seen. The cow shifted slightly under his touch, and his heart jumped. He held his ground, trying not to flinch. "It's okay," the rancher said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Keep going, you're doing fine, just a little more." The visitor's mind raced. His body wanted to pull away, to avoid the discomfort, but his determination forced him to stay. He reminded himself that this was not just about him. It was about learning, about responsibility, about respect. The fear was still there, but he began to realize that fear and courage could exist together. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward even when the fear was strong. As he continued, he noticed the small details he hadn't before. The cow's muscles flexed under its coat, the way its hooves pressed into the ground, the subtle shift in its weight. Every movement mattered. Every gesture carried meaning. He began to feel a connection, not just to the animal, but to the work itself. He understood that this wasn't just a task, it was part of life on the ranch, part of a rhythm that had been repeated for generations. The rancher stayed close, his presence both reassuring and instructional. "Good," he said quietly. "Now stay calm, move slowly. Focus on what you're doing, not on what might happen." The visitor nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and pride. He was actually doing it. He was taking part, learning by doing, facing his first real challenge. Minutes passed, though they felt much longer. Every second was intense, every movement deliberate. The visitor could feel the sweat on his brow, the tension in his shoulders, and yet he also felt something else, something stronger. A sense of achievement, a sense that he was capable of more than he had imagined. The fear was still there, but it was tempered by determination, by focus, by the quiet guidance of the rancher. When the task was finally complete, the visitor stepped back, breathing heavily. His hands were sore, his arms tired, but there was a glow of satisfaction in his chest. He had done it. He had faced the fear, followed the instructions, and completed his first real challenge on the ranch. The rancher placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling. "See, I told you it would be over quick. You did well." The visitor smiled, but it wasn't just relief on his face. It was pride. He had learned something important, not just about the work on the ranch, but about himself. He had faced a fear he didn't know he could face, and he had come through it stronger. He realized that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about acting even when you are afraid. After a moment to catch his breath, the rancher led him to the next task. The visitor felt more confident now, though he knew challenges still awaited. Each task on the ranch required focus, patience, and respect. He had learned that the work wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. Every movement, every decision, every action mattered. He understood that the rancher's calm demeanor was not just for show. It was built from years of experience, from learning to handle difficult situations with care and precision. As they moved through the morning, the visitor began to notice the small rhythms of ranch life. The way the animals interacted, the way the rancher moved, the way the land seemed to breathe with life. It all created a sense of harmony and connection. He felt a part of something larger than himself, something enduring and real. Each moment was a lesson, each task a chance to grow. By midday, the visitor's initial fear had transformed into focus. He still felt the nerves, the tension, the awareness of responsibility, but he also felt excitement and curiosity. He was learning not just skills, but a way of thinking, a way of being present, a way of respecting life. He realized that every challenge he faced here would teach him more than he could imagine. The fear he felt was not a weakness, it was the beginning of understanding, the first step toward courage. The rancher glanced at him with approval. "You're learning fast," he said. "It's not just about strength, it's about attention, patience, and respect. You have all three." The visitor nodded, feeling the weight and truth of those words. He had come to the ranch seeking an experience, but he was finding more than that. He was discovering a way to face fear, to grow, to connect with the world around him. The morning had started with nervousness and hesitation, but now it was filled with understanding and quiet pride. As they finished the last task before lunch, the visitor looked around the ranch with new eyes. The animals, the fences, the barn, the wide-open sky, it all seemed richer, more alive, more significant. He felt a connection to this place, to the work, and to the lessons he was learning. The fear that had gripped him in the morning had not disappeared, but it had transformed into respect, focus, and courage. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the land. The visitor knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of fear and learning, but he also knew that he was ready. He had faced his first real test, and he had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware. He understood that every first time was difficult, but every first time also held the promise of growth and understanding. Sitting down for a brief rest, the visitor reflected on the morning. The rancher had guided him, but he had done the work himself. He had faced the fear, moved carefully, and respected the animals. He realized that this was only the beginning of his journey on the ranch, but it was a strong and meaningful beginning. He smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction that came from accomplishment, understanding, and courage. The sun had reached its highest point, casting a warm glow over the sprawling ranch. Shadows shifted slowly across the fences and barns, and the gentle rustle of leaves and grass seemed louder now in the stillness of midday. For the young visitor, the anticipation of what was coming next made each sound sharper, each movement more vivid. He had been practicing, observing, and following the rancher's instructions, but now it was time for the first real challenge, the moment he had been both dreading and waiting for. The rancher approached, his calm presence grounding the nervous visitor. "This is it," he said. "You've done well watching and helping, but now it's your turn to take the next step. It will hurt, yes, but it will be over quickly if you stay focused. I'll be right here the entire time." The words were meant to reassure, but the visitor felt his stomach twist nervously. He could feel his palms sweat and his heartbeat thumping in his ears. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the tools, and he had to remind himself to breathe slowly. He repeated the rancher's words over and over in his mind. "It'll be over quick. Focus. Stay calm." The mantra helped, but the fear still lingered, sharp and real. The cow he had been working with earlier stood quietly in the corral, its dark eyes watching him with a calm, steady gaze. The animal seemed to sense the tension in his body, and the visitor reminded himself that fear could make the task harder. He had to be brave, not fearless, but determined, careful, and respectful. The rancher demonstrated the steps again, moving with a precision born from years of experience. Each motion was deliberate, practiced, and controlled. He spoke softly as he worked, explaining every movement, every reason behind it. "Watch closely," he said. "Notice how I position my hands, how I move slowly but firmly. This is about balance, between control and gentleness. The animal responds to your confidence." The visitor leaned in, his eyes fixed on every motion. He memorized the details, the way the rancher shifted his weight, the steady placement of his hands, the way he communicated with the cow without words. The visitor's own body tensed as he prepared for his turn. This was the moment he had been waiting for, but now that it had arrived, it felt heavier than he had imagined. When the rancher looked at him and nodded, it was time. "You're ready," he said. "Take a deep breath and focus. Remember, stay calm, move carefully, respect the animal, and it will go smoothly." The visitor swallowed hard, feeling the tools in his hands, the sun on his back, and the steady presence of the rancher beside him. He stepped closer to the cow, positioning himself exactly as he had been shown. Every muscle in his body felt tense, every nerve alert. The cow shifted slightly under his touch, and he froze for a moment, his fear threatening to take over. "Steady," the rancher said calmly. "You've got this." The words reassured him, but the visitor could feel the sharp edge of nervousness cutting through his focus. He remembered the mornings in the city, the easy routines of life that had never required this kind of courage. Nothing had prepared him for this, the real, raw experience of responsibility, of handling a living, powerful creature, of facing a moment that could hurt but could also teach him strength. With slow, deliberate movements, he followed the steps the rancher had taught him. His hands were careful but firm, his breathing steadying as he focused on the task. The cow shifted again, stronger this time, and he felt a jolt of fear run through his body. His instinct was to step back, but he remembered the lessons of the morning. Courage isn't about avoiding pain, it's about facing it. "It's all right," the rancher said, his voice steady. "Just a little more, you're doing fine." The visitor gritted his teeth, his mind focusing on the process, not the fear. Each second felt stretched, every small movement amplified. He felt the sting of discomfort as the task began, the sharp, sudden awareness of pain. He flinched instinctively, and for a moment his confidence wavered. But the rancher stayed close, guiding him, reminding him that the pain was temporary, that focus and patience would carry him through. He could feel the intensity building, each motion requiring more attention, more courage. The cow's strength pressed against him, the tools felt heavier, and his body shook slightly under the strain. He remembered why he was here, not just to learn a skill but to understand resilience, to discover the strength within himself. The fear, the pain, and the uncertainty were all part of that lesson. "Almost there," the rancher said, his hand steadying the visitor's. "Keep your focus, it's just a few more moments." The visitor nodded, his jaw tight, his breathing controlled. Pain and fear coursed through him, but determination anchored him. He could feel the sting, sharp and immediate, but he also felt a strange sense of power. The realization that he could endure, that he could face this moment and see it through. Every flinch, every gasp of breath was met with steady guidance, and slowly the intensity began to fade. As the final steps approached, the visitor found a rhythm. His movements became more confident, his focus sharper, and the sting of pain became manageable. The cow remained steady, responding to his careful, deliberate actions. The moment that had seemed unbearable at first now felt like something he could handle. It was still difficult, still challenging, but he had discovered that he could face it, that he could trust his training, and that he could rely on the rancher's guidance. When it was finally over, the visitor stepped back, his body trembling, his hands sore, but his spirit alive with pride and relief. He had done it. He had faced the first real test, the first real moment of pain, and had come through it stronger. The rancher placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling with approval. "See, I told you it would be over quick," he said. "You did well." The visitor's relief was immediate, but so was a deep sense of accomplishment. He had felt fear and pain, but he had also felt courage, resilience, and focus. He realized that this moment, as intense and challenging as it had been, was also a turning point. He had learned more about himself in those few minutes than he could have imagined, about patience, determination, and the strength that comes from facing difficulty head-on. He looked at the cow with new eyes now. It was no longer just an animal to be managed. It was a partner in this lesson, a living being that had helped him discover his own courage. He felt respect for the creature and for the work of the rancher, understanding that skill and patience were as important as strength. The rancher guided him through a few final motions, showing him how to complete the task safely and efficiently. Each step reinforced the lessons of focus, control, and respect. The visitor followed carefully, his confidence growing with every action. He noticed how much easier it was now that he had faced the hardest part, how the rhythm of the work began to feel natural once he had endured the initial shock and fear. By the time the task was fully complete, the visitor's body ached slightly, and his hands were sore, but his mind was clear and alert. He felt a new sense of pride and accomplishment, a quiet satisfaction that came not from avoiding pain, but from facing it, understanding it, and learning from it. The rancher smiled at him, a mixture of approval and encouragement in his eyes. "You've done well today," the rancher said, "not just with the task, but with how you handled yourself. That's more important than anything else. Pain is temporary, but the courage you've shown will stay with you." The visitor nodded, feeling the truth of those words. He had learned that real courage was not about never feeling fear or pain. It was about acknowledging it, facing it, and continuing despite it. The experience had been intense, even overwhelming at times, but it had also been transformative. He felt stronger, more aware, and more capable than he had just a few hours ago. As they stepped back from the corral, the visitor reflected on what had just happened. The fear he had felt, the pain he had endured, and the lessons he had learned were all part of a journey, one that would continue throughout the day, and indeed, throughout his life. He realized that first times were always the hardest, but they were also the moments that taught the most. Sitting briefly on the edge of the corral, the visitor let out a deep breath. The pain had faded, but the lessons remained. He looked at the rancher with gratitude, understanding that the guidance and patience he had been shown were as important as the skill he had learned. The rancher had not just helped him complete a task, he had helped him face fear, endure discomfort, and discover a new level of confidence. As the sun continued to shine over the ranch, the visitor felt a quiet transformation within himself. He had faced a real challenge, and he had emerged stronger. He knew that there would be more difficult moments ahead, more tests of courage and patience, but he also knew that he had taken the first step. The fear was still there, but now it was tempered by experience, understanding, and resilience. The morning had started with nerves, hesitation, and uncertainty. Now it was ending with confidence, pride, and a deeper understanding of courage. The visitor had discovered something important about himself, about the work on the ranch, and about life itself. That the hardest moments, the moments that hurt the most, are also the ones that teach us the most. And as the rancher guided him toward the next task, the visitor walked with his head held a little higher, his steps steadier, and his heart a little braver, ready for whatever lessons the day had left to teach. The afternoon sun hung warm in the sky, casting long shadows across the wide ranch fields. The air was filled with the familiar sounds of life, the soft lowing of cows, the occasional whinny of a horse, and the rustle of grass as the wind whispered across the land. The young visitor sat quietly on the edge of the corral, his body still a little sore from the morning's work, but his mind alive with thoughts he could barely put into words. He had faced his first real challenge on the ranch, endured the sharp sting of discomfort, and survived moments that had seemed almost impossible at first. And yet, as he sat there, reflecting, he realized that what he had gained went far beyond the task itself. It was not just skill he had learned, but a new understanding of courage, patience, and respect for life, for work, and for the animals he had come to care for. The rancher approached, moving slowly with a calm confidence that seemed to belong entirely to the rhythm of the land. He stopped beside the visitor and offered a gentle smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of experience, as if he understood that the answers would not come immediately. The visitor thought for a moment. "Tired," he admitted. "My hands hurt and my arms are sore, but I feel different. I don't know exactly how to explain it." The rancher nodded knowingly. "That's normal," he said. "It's not just physical, it's emotional too. You faced fear and discomfort and came through it. That leaves a mark, a lesson, and a kind of strength you can't get any other way." The visitor looked out at the corral, at the animals grazing quietly in the sunlight, and thought about everything he had experienced that morning. The nervous anticipation, the trembling hands, the sharp sting of pain, the surge of adrenaline, every moment had been vivid and intense. And yet through it all he had learned something important. That fear was not the enemy but a guide, showing him what mattered and teaching him what he was capable of. "You see," the rancher continued, "life on the ranch and life in general is full of moments like that. Moments that hurt, that scare you, that test you. Most people run from them, but the ones who learn, who grow, are the ones who face them. You've just taken your first real step." The visitor nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He had always thought of courage as something dramatic or heroic, something that only appeared in stories or movies. But now he understood that courage was quiet, practical, and deeply personal. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about moving forward even when you were afraid, even when it hurt, and even when you weren't sure you could do it. He remembered the rancher's hands guiding him, the careful instructions, the calm presence beside him. Without that guidance, he knew he might have frozen completely, overwhelmed by the fear and intensity of the moment. But with it, he had found a way to act, to endure, and to learn. It was a lesson not just about ranch work, but about life itself, the importance of support, patience, and trust. As he sat there, he also began to notice the animals differently. Before, they had seemed like obstacles or challenges to be managed, but now he saw them in a new light. They were intelligent, aware, and patient. They responded to care, attention, and respect. The visitor realized that every movement, every action, every decision mattered, not just for the outcome of the task, but for the well-being of the creatures he worked with. The animals had taught him as much as the rancher had, in their quiet, watchful way. The rancher sat down beside him, looking out over the field. "You're learning fast," he said quietly. "But remember, learning is more than doing a task. It's about reflection, understanding, and growth. Take the time to think about what just happened, what you felt, and what it taught you. That's how experience becomes wisdom." The visitor nodded again, feeling the truth in those words. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze calm him. He thought back over the morning, the fear, the pain, the focus, and the eventual relief. He realized that the challenge had forced him to be fully present, to pay attention to every detail, to listen to the rancher, and to trust himself. It had been exhausting, but also enlightening. He thought about the small victories in the process, keeping his hands steady, following the steps correctly, maintaining focus even when the discomfort surged. Each one had required effort and courage, and each one had built his confidence. He realized that life's challenges, no matter how small or large, worked the same way. Each moment of fear or difficulty carried an opportunity to grow if only he was willing to face it. The rancher spoke again, his voice gentle. "It's easy to forget how strong you are until you're tested. Pain, fear, and challenge show us our limits and then teach us how to go beyond them. That's what you did today. You went beyond what you thought you could handle." The visitor felt a warm sense of pride. He had always imagined himself as capable, but this morning had proven something deeper. It had proven that he could endure, focus, and act even under pressure. He had discovered a new layer of his own resilience, a kind of inner strength that he hadn't known existed. As they walked slowly back toward the barn, the visitor noticed how quiet the ranch had become. The animals moved calmly, the breeze whispered through the tall grass, and the sun painted everything in soft, golden light. It felt peaceful, almost sacred. The visitor realized that the ranch itself had a rhythm, a balance, and a quiet wisdom. He felt lucky to witness it, to participate in it, and to learn from it. Sitting on the steps of the barn for a short rest, the visitor reflected on another important lesson: patience. The rancher had never rushed him, never scolded him, never demanded perfection. He had guided, observed, and supported. The visitor realized that real learning required patience, from oneself and from others. Progress wasn't always fast or easy, but it was meaningful when approached with care and attention. The visitor also thought about courage again. He realized that courage wasn't just about facing the first challenge, but about being willing to continue, to keep learning, and to keep trying even after the pain and fear had passed. Courage was something he could carry into other parts of his life, school, friendships, and even future work. It was a skill, a mindset, and a way of living. He looked at the rancher with gratitude, understanding that the calm, steady presence had made all the difference. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing me, guiding me, and helping me through it. I don't think I could have done it without you." The rancher smiled. "You did it yourself," he said. "I only guided you. The courage, focus, and patience came from you. Never forget that. Every time you face a challenge, remember this morning. You already have what it takes." The visitor felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of accomplishment and connection that went beyond words. He had learned something important about life, work, and himself. He had faced fear, endured pain, and come out stronger. He had learned to respect not just the animals, but the process, the work, and the quiet wisdom of those who guide others with patience. As the afternoon stretched on, the visitor began to notice the beauty in the ordinary. The sway of the grass, the gentle movements of the cows, the soft clucking of chickens. It all felt alive, meaningful, and connected. Every small detail mattered, and he felt a deeper appreciation for the ranch, the animals, and the work that kept it running. He realized that the lessons he had learned went far beyond the ranch itself. They were lessons about life, about courage, patience, respect, focus, and growth. He understood that challenges would continue to come, sometimes painful, sometimes difficult, but each one carried an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become stronger. By the time the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the ranch in shades of gold and amber, the visitor felt a quiet confidence. He was still young, still learning, and still facing fears. But he had discovered something within himself, a strength, a courage, and a sense of understanding that he would carry forward. He knew that the experiences of this day, the first real challenge on the ranch, would remain with him forever. As the rancher called him to help with a few lighter tasks before evening, the visitor stood with a little more assurance in his step. He knew that he was still learning, still growing, and still facing new challenges. But now he also knew that he could face them. He had faced fear, endured pain, and discovered courage. And that, he realized, was just the beginning. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. The ranch, which had felt vast and intimidating that morning, now seemed calmer, more familiar, and almost comforting. The young visitor walked beside the rancher, feeling a lightness in his step he hadn't noticed before. The events of the day, the fear, the pain, the learning, and the reflection, had left him changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. The day had been long, filled with challenges, new experiences, and lessons that reached far beyond the ranch tasks themselves. The first moments had been nerve-wracking, his hands trembling as he watched the cow, his heart racing with anticipation. Then had come the peak of the challenge, when the sting of pain hit him, sharp and real, and he had thought he might falter. But he hadn't. He had faced the fear, followed the rancher's guidance, and endured the discomfort. And now, as the afternoon faded into evening, he felt the reward, not in recognition or praise, but in the quiet, unshakable knowledge that he had grown. The rancher glanced at him, a hint of pride in his steady eyes. "You've done well today," he said quietly, "not just with the tasks, but with how you handled yourself. Most people shy away from the hard moments, but you faced them. That makes all the difference." The visitor smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. He realized that the lesson wasn't about finishing a task or handling an animal. It was about understanding himself, his limits, and his own ability to push beyond them. The morning had seemed impossible at first, yet here he was, standing taller, walking more confidently, and feeling a quiet pride that he knew would stay with him. As they moved through the ranch, he noticed the small details he had missed earlier. The swaying grass seemed more alive, the sounds of the animals more distinct, and the wind on his face more refreshing. Everything seemed sharper, clearer, more meaningful. He realized that being present, truly aware of the world around him, had been one of the biggest lessons of the day. It wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about paying attention, learning from each moment, and understanding the connection between effort, patience, and growth. The visitor thought back to the cow he had worked with and the lessons it had quietly taught him. The animal had been patient, aware, and responsive. It had demanded respect, attention, and care. Through it, he had learned more about courage, discipline, and empathy than any book or story could have taught him. He felt a deep appreciation for life itself, the creatures that shared this land with humans, the work that kept the ranch running, and the quiet strength it took to face challenges every day. The rancher led him toward the barn, where the evening chores awaited. Despite the day's intensity, the visitor felt eager, ready to help and learn more. He noticed how much more confident his movements were now, how much steadier his hands, and how much calmer his mind felt. The fear that had gripped him in the morning still lingered faintly, but it had been replaced by determination, focus, and a quiet courage that came from experience. "See," the rancher said as they approached the barn, "every day teaches something. Today it was courage and patience. Tomorrow it will be something else. Life is full of lessons if you're willing to learn." The visitor nodded, feeling the weight of those words. He realized that this day would stay with him forever, not because of the tasks he had completed, but because of what he had learned about himself. He had discovered that he could face fear, endure discomfort, and emerge stronger. He had learned the value of patience, of careful observation, and of respect for others, both human and animal. As they began the evening chores, the visitor found himself moving with ease, following the rancher's guidance but also trusting his own instincts. He handled the animals with care, paid attention to every detail, and moved confidently through the tasks. He realized that the lessons of the day had not just prepared him for the ranch work, they had prepared him for life. Challenges, discomfort, and fear were a part of life, but they were also opportunities for growth, understanding, and transformation. During a quiet moment, the visitor paused to watch the sun dip lower, the sky ablaze with color. The ranch seemed peaceful, almost magical in the fading light. He felt a deep sense of connection to the land, to the animals, to the rancher, and to himself. The experiences of the day had changed him subtly but profoundly. He walked taller, breathed more deeply, and carried a calm confidence that he had never felt before. The rancher watched him with a quiet satisfaction. "You've grown today," he said, "not just in skill but in understanding. Remember, the lessons you learn here are for life, not just the ranch. Courage, patience, focus, respect, they're things you can carry everywhere." The visitor felt gratitude swell in his chest. He realized that the rancher's guidance had been invaluable, but the real change had come from within himself. He had faced the challenge, endured the pain, reflected on the experience, and discovered a strength he hadn't known he possessed. The transformation was complete, not dramatic, not flashy, but quiet, steady, and real. As they finished the chores and prepared to call it a day, the visitor looked out across the fields, the sun now just above the horizon. The shadows were long, the colors rich, and the air cool and refreshing. He felt a sense of completion, of understanding, and of readiness for whatever lay ahead. The day had tested him, taught him, and transformed him. He knew that he would never forget this experience, that the lessons he had learned would guide him in the days, months, and years to come. The rancher gave him a final nod of approval. "You've done well today. Remember this feeling, this confidence, and this understanding. Life will test you in many ways, but you now know that you have the strength to face it." The visitor smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride and satisfaction. He realized that the fear he had felt earlier was not gone, but it had become manageable, tempered by experience and courage. He had learned that first times were always the hardest, but they were also the most important, shaping who he was and who he would become. As they walked back toward the ranch house, the visitor reflected on the day. He had faced fear, endured pain, learned patience, discovered courage, and gained a deeper understanding of respect and responsibility. He had grown not just in skill, but in character. Every moment, every challenge, every lesson had built him into someone stronger, wiser, and more aware. The rancher's presence, steady and calm throughout the day, had been a guiding force, but the real transformation had come from the visitor's own determination, focus, and courage. He had learned that guidance was valuable, but personal effort, reflection, and endurance were what truly shaped growth. As they reached the ranch house, the visitor paused one last time to look at the land he had walked, worked, and learned from all day. The fields, the animals, the barns, and the fences had all played a role in his journey. He felt a profound connection to the place and the work, and a deep understanding of the lessons it had taught him. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a soft purple and pink. The visitor felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him, a sense of completion and transformation. He had faced the first real challenge of the ranch, endured discomfort, reflected deeply, and emerged stronger. The lessons of courage, patience, focus, and respect would stay with him forever. As he turned to follow the rancher inside, he felt a newfound confidence in himself, a quiet determination to face future challenges with the same focus and courage he had discovered today. He knew that life would continue to test him, but he was ready. He had faced fear, endured pain, learned valuable lessons, and transformed. And that transformation, he realized, was just the beginning of many more to come. The visitor smiled, a calm, steady smile, knowing that he had grown in ways he had never imagined. The day on the ranch had ended, but the lessons, the courage, and the confidence he had gained would carry him forward, always.